You know, when we think about solving a murder, our minds usually jump to DNA, right? Or maybe a fingerprint. But sometimes, the clue that blows a case wide open is way more personal. It's something hiding in plain sight. Today, we're diving into a case that wasn't cracked by science, but by a killer's own very unique handwriting.
So let's go back to June 1st, 1989. Picture this, Tampa Bay, Florida. It's a beautiful day, boats are out on the water, just a totally normal scene. But then a group of tourists on a boat spots something, floating. As they get closer, that sense of curiosity turns to pure horror. It's a body, a woman's body, and unfortunately, she's not the only one.
When police get to the scene, it is absolutely chilling. They pull not one, not two, but 3 bodies from the water. It turns out to be a mother and her 2 teenage daughters. And the way they were found, I mean, it's just brutal and so calculated. Their mouths were taped shut, their hands were tied with this distinct yellow rope, and their feet were bound to heavy concrete blocks. But the most terrifying detail comes from the medical examiner. They were thrown into the water while they were still alive.
Okay, so job number 1 for investigators is just figuring out who these poor women are. Give them their names back. And from there, who could have possibly done something this horrific? As you can probably guess, the investigation almost immediately zeroes in on the most obvious suspect.
It doesn't take long. A call comes in from a manager at a local Days Inn, and all the pieces just click into place. The victims are identified as Joan Rogers and her 2 daughters, Michelle, who was 17, and Christine, just 14 years old. And what's so tragic is they were just on vacation. They had driven over 1,500 kilometers, all the way from their family's dairy farm in Ohio, just to get a little bit of Florida sun. So, naturally, investigators get in touch with the husband and father, Hal Rogers, who's back on the farm in Ohio. But his reaction, it's baffling, to say the least. He knew they were supposed to be back home already, but he waited 3 whole days before ever reporting them missing. That seeming lack of concern, yeah, that shoots him right to the top of the suspect list.
And when they talked to him, Hal Rogers was described as just shockingly cold, unemotional. He actually told detectives he was just too busy with the farm to get all worked up about it. But here's the thing, as suspicious as his whole vibe was, his alibi was absolutely ironclad. I mean, he was 1,500 kilometers away. He lived in a tiny little town where literally everyone knew him and had seen him day in and day out. There was no way he could have been in Florida. And just like that, the police were right back at square one, a dead end.
So, with their main and really only suspect totally cleared, the trail just goes ice cold. Instantly. We're talking pre-DNA database era, so there's nothing forensic left at the scene by the water. The only thing they have to go on is the family's car, which they found abandoned near a public boat ramp.
And it's inside that car, just tucked away, that investigators find what will turn out to be the single most important clue in this entire investigation. And no, it's not a weapon, it's not a hidden fingerprint, it's just 2 small pieces of paper, 2 handwritten notes.
When they look at these 2 notes, it's like night and day. Handwriting experts confirm that one of them was definitely written by Joan Rogers. It's directions to the exact boat ramp where her car was found. And her last 2 words on that note were blue and white. We'll come back to that. But the second note was clearly written by someone else. This one gave directions to the Rogers Hotel. And the handwriting, it was bizarre, unlike anything the investigators had ever come across.
So the working theory becomes pretty obvious, right? The second note must have been written by the killer, and it held this incredible clue. The writer had these really strange quirks. For example, they'd put a capital T right in the middle of a word, and they wrote the letter Y 4 completely different ways on this one little note. It was as unique as a fingerprint, or a signature. But here's the frustrating part. Even with this one-of-a-kind clue, the case just stalls. It hits a brick wall. Years start to tick by. No arrests, no new suspects, and no justice for the Rogers family. The case goes completely cold, which forces the investigators to get creative. I mean, really creative. They had to consider a truly desperate, out-of-the-box idea.
I mean, think about that. For 3 long, agonizing years, the killer was just a ghost. The case was officially cold. A grieving family was left with 0 answers, and the investigators were just haunted by this incredibly brutal crime they couldn't solve.
So, what's this desperate plan? Well, investigators decided to take their one and only solid clue public, but in a way that, as far as I know, had never been done before.
They literally took a sample of the killer's bizarre handwriting from the note, blew it up to a massive size, and plastered it across 5 huge billboards throughout Florida. The message was simple: "Do you know who wrote this?" along with a number for a tip line.
Now you gotta admit, it seems like a total long shot, right? I mean, who recognizes handwriting from a billboard while they're driving down the highway? But then, the phone rang, and that one single phone call was about to change absolutely everything. A woman is on the line. She saw one of the billboards and had this jolt of recognition. She said she remembered that exact same strange handwriting from an old work invoice she had, and she knew who it belonged to: her former neighbor, a man named Ob Chandler. And just like that, after 3 years of dead ends, police finally had a name.
So of course they immediately start digging into this Ob Chandler guy. And right away, the puzzle pieces start snapping into place. He's a local aluminum contractor, 43 years old. He's got a long criminal record, filled with assaults, particularly on women. And then they find the detail that must have made their blood run cold. He owned a boat, a blue and white boat. Remember those last words Joan Rogers wrote, blue and white? And here's the really tragic part. They find out a neighbor had actually reported him years before, based on a police sketch, but the tip had just gotten lost in the shuffle, buried.
As the police are building their case, something else happens. Another woman comes forward. She was a Canadian tourist, and she had been sexually assaulted just 2 weeks before the Rogers families were murdered. Her story was chillingly similar. A man had lured her and her friend onto his boat, promising a sunset cruise, and then he attacked her. When the police showed her a photo of Ob Chandler, she identified him instantly, no hesitation. That was her attacker.
And from that moment on, the evidence against him just becomes an avalanche. You've got forensic experts confirming a 100% match between the handwriting on the billboard and Chandler's. They find his palm print on that killer's note. The Canadian tourist picks him out of a live police lineup, no problem. And as the final nail in the coffin, a jailhouse informant comes forward and testifies that Chandler had actually bragged to him about killing those 3 women, saying one of them had tried to fight back.
I mean, the case against him was absolutely overwhelming. There was no way out. But what's really chilling is that even after he was convicted, the full, horrifying scope of what Ob Chandler had done, it still wasn't completely understood.
So, in 1994, Ob Chandler is found guilty on all counts and sentenced to death. He ends up spending 17 years on death row before he's finally executed in 2011. But believe it or not, the story doesn't end there. 4 years after his death, advances in DNA technology allowed investigators to finally solve another cold case, a murder of a young woman from 1990. And the DNA matched. It was Ob Chandler. This whole time, he wasn't just a murderer, he was a serial killer.
You know, right up to the very end, Ob Chandler claimed he was innocent. He even left a final written statement saying he was a guiltless man. But the irony is just incredible, isn't it? The same hand that wrote that final claim of innocence was the very same hand that wrote that bizarre little note that led police right to his doorstep years earlier. In the end, he planned what he probably thought was the perfect murder. He could overpower his victims, tie them up, sink them with concrete blocks so they'd never be found. But he forgot one crucial detail: how to disguise his own handwriting. He couldn't hide the one piece of evidence that was uniquely and damningly his.